Hey, this is Dave Pryor. You're about to watch my video podcast interview with Dan Eberle about how he uses an Obeya and Agile practices when he's making movies. Before you watch the video, I just want to let you know that if you check the show notes, you're going to find links to some additional photographs, things we couldn't figure out how to work into the podcast, but they are important to the conversation. They're pictures that Dan took while he was on site of examples of Obeyas and how people are using that stuff while they're making their movies. So that's it. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the interview.
If you learn to work the old way, but the new way's what you need. My job's to make that switch from old to new. Something less for you than it did for me. Here on Drunken PM Radio. Whoa! Here on Drunken PM Radio. Whoa!
Hey, this is Dave Pryor. Welcome to The Reluctant Agilist. We're doing video this time, and Dan Eberle's back. Dan, thanks for taking time out of your day.
Thanks for having me,
For
Dave.
the second time. We're doing this a second time because I had some technical issues the first time. What we're going to talk about today is Obeyas. So if you don't know what that is, you should definitely stay tuned because you're probably using some form of it and it could get better. But before we do that, Dan, would you mind telling these fine people who you are and what you do and why you're sitting in a room full of fluorescent lights?
Hi, everyone. My name is Dan. So I do a bunch of different stuff. I'm a filmmaker. I'm a writer and producer. And I'm also an Agile coach, and I am an Agile coach both as a consultant and for full-time for the New York Times, which you may have heard of. And basically, I kind of think of what I do as leadership and collaboration coaching. And I use a lot of lean and Agile tools and lots of other kinds of tools. And then Dave and I are both students of Jim Benson, and I'm sure we'll mention him later on.
All right. And you are applying a lot of the practices that we talk about in Agile into your, I don't want to call it a side hustle. That sounds really irritating, but your passion.
I think of Agile coaching as my side hustle, actually. But that's
all right. No, that's really, I think that's important because your identity is as a filmmaker and you're doing this other thing on the side. Hopefully the New York Times isn't watching this.
I hope that they are. They actually like it when I do stuff like this.
Okay.
So basically, just very quickly, I don't really think of these different things that I do as being like sort of separate. I think of them as all kind of a piece. And I'll just briefly say, because I could certainly talk about this for a long time, as you know, that a lot of what we look to accomplish using different kinds of Agile approaches and sort of the Agile as a philosophical container for dealing with complex, difficult work and being responsive to change. The same kinds the same kind of mental operating system is what we have to leverage in creative arts. So I was a jazz musician for a long time, and then went into acting and producing and all the rest. And a lot of the arts, all of the arts, unless it's like a solo art, involves working with people from other disciplines, usually people that have a very different perspective than you, but yet you're in a shared commitment environment. So it's about kind of converging all these different kinds of folks together to accomplish a singular goal. Okay.
All right. So I want to move towards that in a second, but I want to go back to something you said a few minutes ago. So you said you don't keep these things separate. And I want to check in on this because I don't consider the stuff that I do to be separate either. But I know there's a lot of people out there that are still in I have my work life and my personal life.
Right.
And I am at a place where it's all my work. Work, not in the sense that I have a job, but in someday I'll be dead. And all the things I created or was a part of building, whether that is my family or music or classes or software, whatever, it's all the work that I was a part of. And is that kind of how you are? Is it different the way you think of it, or is that fairly similar?
I love that. And I applaud that. I think that I have a slightly more nuanced view, but I don't, again, I do think of them as, I know that's it sounded pejorative. What I mean to say is I have this slightly different way that I kind of slice it up than what you just described. So basically there is the art, the purely creative work that exists for its own sake. Right. And then there's everything else. which is sort of utilitarian scaffolding to make it possible for the spontaneous art to occur. Yeah. Or not so spontaneous in the case of filmmaking, because there's a tremendous amount of preparation. So, so in that respect, the same kinds of scaffolding tools, processes, whatever, they're the same for the creation of the art for its own sake, as well as what I would suggest for people that are in a more kind of transactional, kind of artisanal domain, like software engineering or management and leadership or politics, or whoever I was advising on however they were trying to navigate a very complex domain.
Okay. All right, I'm going to take a second.
So I'm basically agreeing with you using different words.
I just want to take a second just for everybody to acknowledge that you just referred to artisanal software development.
Hey, it is. If you've heard the old, it's a cliche now, but if we made cars the way we make software, every car would be different.
Yep.
So artisanal in the artisanship sense. So
got it. Not in the like foodie sense.
I don't know. It depends on if you consider food to be art. But
I'm just making fun of the word artisanal. It's fine. Okay. We can move on.
All right. Let's move on.
All right.
We have to finish at 3. So.
Yes. So what is an Obeya? Let's talk about Obeyas. Because this is something, and I mentioned this when we did the other one. Up until about a year ago, I never heard that word. And now it's like the word pivot or agile. Like I just can't get away from it. So how would you explain, and I've been using a variation of them for a while, or parts of them. But how do you explain an Obeya to somebody?
Simply put, an Obeya is a place where you go to get any and all information that you need to be successful in your endeavor or enterprise. Okay. So it oftentimes it's a room filled with visualizations and things, but it's an active space that is that's used by the people that do the work and that manage the work and preside over the work, and also people who are interested in the work or invested in it in some way. Everyone is, the way I think of it is, everyone's invited, but it's an active space that we constantly maintain and we use to basically stay aligned. So it's a kind of mission control.
Okay. I like the fact that you said it's a space that we use, because it's not just burn down charts and backlogs and crap up on the walls, but we're meeting with people there. We're collaborating there. We are working on the system together to figure out how to create the things we're creating. Right.
I use the term, this is, I think this may be a kind of a fifth discipline quote, but I think of it as like a generative space. Like it's a space of generative learning, just generating new stuff. When I think about what agility is for, or just like we could just say collaboration is for, it's to kind of create a new harmonic by putting these different voices together. It creates a new thing. And that's what happens when you get people the right diverse professional people, or the right people together, and they make an interesting harmonic, and it creates a new thing that wasn't there before we all got there and sang our notes together.
So for those of you that are listening, like, just to make sure this is super locked in, we're not just talking about information radiators that sit up on a wall broadcasting, like pushing information out. We're talking about a space that has information available, and it's a space where people come together to work on the thing together. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah. So the radiators aren't just radiators. They're tools that we use to collaborate. Yeah. And I would go further in saying that when you're dealing across disciplines, the use of visualizations is the thing. So most of these tools, in my view, are visual. There could be some lists, there could be ancillary documents and things. Just depends on what problems you're solving or what the domain of your work. But what I'm looking for when I design an Obeya, or when I'm helping other people do it, is what is the simplest set of visualizations that give us the information that we need and that we can use to communicate. Because especially in a global economy such as we are, we've got people that are working hard just to kind of understand what each other are saying. So anything that we can use to visually communicate is going to make that bond all the stronger.
Okay.
And the key to responding to change is strong, enabling, connective constraints.
Okay. Do you want to say more about that, or do you want to go into how you use it for film?
Oh, I'll simply say
I don't know if we should do one before the other. That's why I'm asking.
Well, no, I think we can kind of do them a little bit in parallel, and that what we're looking to do is we're trying to connect the people together. We want them to feel connected to each other, connected to the work, connected to the narrative of the flow of the work, and also be connected to how we're designing our approach to what's next. So these are the basic, and it sounds very abstract and broad the way we're talking about it, but it really is as simple as that. And depending on what it is, the nature of the work itself, your professionalism, your skills will be used to do that to good effect.
Okay. I think connecting to the work is a really big deal, because a lot of people out there just have, I feel sad for all of these people, but there are a lot of people who just have jobs that they go do, and they don't understand the narrative, as you mentioned, or the story behind it, or how it impacts the world. In the same way that guy that was sweeping in NASA said you helped put men on the moon. Like he had a different understanding of his work than just sweeping the floor.
Yeah. I think it was, again, another Peter Senge quote is, if I know what kind of table and how this table will be used, I will wipe it off differently. Whether it's an operating table or some greasy lunch table in high school.
Okay.
I guess that one doesn't really get wiped off. But the point being that
you push the stuff around, push the germs around.
Push it. Yeah. But anyway, that sort of sense of context, impact. It was Alistair Cockburn, and I've been saying this a lot lately. Alistair Cockburn has been quoted as saying that if you focus on skills, community, and communication over processes and tools, you will absolutely be ready for change. You will be more agile.
Okay.
Yeah, as a result. And that's what we're looking for in creative endeavors such as the one that we're about to talk about.
All right. So how have you been able to apply this stuff in your work of creating films?
Yes. So we've always used visualizations to communicate in film. We use things like storyboards and overheads, but filmmaking is obviously it's quite old, and there's very established norms and practices in independent filmmaking, particularly around the sort of the democratizing effects of the digital revolution. Kind of started in the 90s, and now it's like everybody with an iPhone is a cinematographer. We're sort of in a new world. Yeah. And it's not unlike the kind of availability of capability that all kinds of technologists and just people trying to do anything have today. So with that, we're trying to find a way to harness that to basically, I don't want to say do more with less, but ultimately when you're making an independent film, you're typically very constrained by money. Also, you're constrained by time and just availability of people. There's just not as many of us. We do more things. But instead of sort of railing against that or trying to efficientize our way through it, what we're looking to do is turn it into a strength. So one of the things that, one of many truths that has been established many times over is just the notion that when you have a smaller group of people, they can move faster. They can move faster. They can make decisions faster because communication is less complex. There are fewer possible vectors of communication. Okay. So like me to you, that's basically it can go this way or it can go that way. And so it's pretty direct, right? Yep. It's easy to stay aligned, and yet we still have a really hard time staying aligned because as soon as we split off and do our thing, we're kind of in our own heads again. Now, when you add a few more people, the possible variables, it becomes exponentially more challenging. So, so in the making of this film, which we've been shooting for approximately 9 months now, we've been introducing a lot of lean and agile tools and kind of molding them to our needs. So we have a challenge, we have a thing we want to do, and how can we basically do it? And I happen to be a practicing Agile coach, so I have access to lots of devices. But what I also know from being an Agile coach is that if you just show up with a big hot dog cart of processes and tools,
it's not going to help.
You are going to annoy everybody, and they're probably not going to do any of it, or they're going to zombie their way through it and do their own thing. And so we started with a story that we were all excited about. So we sort of assembled a motivated group of people, motivated to accomplish a thing together. Yep. And so that's sort of, the core kind of team design from our Agile Manifesto. Assembling a team around motivated individuals. And so that's what we started with. And I'll just show you, like,
wait, I want to ask, I have a question before you, sure. Is it okay? I'm supposed to interrupt him periodically to ask questions. Just so, please do. Because I'm going to derail it a little bit. But when we talk about using something like Scrum, I always say that, Scrum's job is to help you get as close to predictable as you can by getting a team to be cross-functional and self-organizing. And now all the Kanban people are laughing.
I am too.
But it's going to surface certain things. Like you would hire it to solve a problem. How do I get this group of people to consistently deliver in this time box? Mm-hmm. I imagine that making an independent film is kind of like trying to hold water in your hands. Like, it's just, you show up and everything's going to go sideways. And that's the only thing is that stuff's not going to go the way you thought it would. And you need people there who can handle that. So it's almost like a startup environment, I'm guessing. A lot of chaos. Times. But maybe that's fine. What I'm trying to get to is, like, what problem do you want it to solve when you bring Agile in here? Like, what's it going to fix for you?
So me and my little cohort of filmmakers, we've done this a bunch of times now. So this will be my 7th feature film that I produced on my own, not including the ones that I've worked on other people's things. And so I have a lot of experience at this point. And basically, here's what I'll say is that sort of the classic filmmaking paradigm, in my personal opinion, and this is just my editorialization here, I consider that traditional filmmaking is a very siloed endeavor. It is very much about stay in your lane, do your one skill, and don't worry about what's happening over there. Now, that's not 100% the case all the time, and that I actually think that, and perhaps I just haven't penetrated this level of eliteness in the filmmaking industry, that I think that probably changes when you kind of get up into that upper echelon. But a lot of film and TV production is about, you got a job to do, you got to do that job really good. There's a lot of stakes appended there. And so it's a kind of it makes sense that it's a naturally siloed thing. What you and I both know, having a fair amount of experience in traditional project management, is that project management like that can work. It's just very overhead intensive. Yeah. So waterfall, regardless of just thinking of just generally speaking, it's perfectly logical and it can work in many contexts. You can make it work, but it requires a tremendous amount of management and oversight. And just it's very overhead intensive. Now, that doesn't mean that the Agile sort of analogy to that approach is completely without overhead or without mistakes or without inefficiency or whatever the issue is. But it's really just different tools for different jobs. So in an independent film, it's a little bit, at least in my films, what we're trying to harness is a lot of spontaneity and a lot of generative learning, so we're trying to actually generate something beyond what's just on the page or what's just been planned. We make the plan, and then we really want to create an environment that's catalytic in nature so that we can capture something that is that is different and hopefully better than what we expected. So, so it's a different tool for a different job. But what that means is having a smaller unit and a framework that allows that kind of energy to flow.
Yeah,
that is something that is not stage gated. That is something that is more like water. And so that's what we're going for, and that's what we're trying to solve for.
So is it that these processes that we're about to talk about and you're going to show examples of, they facilitate the spontaneity by creating the structure in which it can occur? That's
the idea. That is exactly it. That's the scaffolding that we use to kind of create the conditions for that to occur. It doesn't mean it always happens, but it means the conditions are there. Also, a big part of this and a big connective enabling constraint, that weird buzzword sounding thing that I said earlier, availability of information, a sense of context, a sense of impact is an extremely motivating thing for people. It gives them a sense that they're here for a reason, and it's not just a sense of, they know that they are here for a reason, and this is the reason, and this is what we are attempting to do, and that has a connective, highly moralizing effect.
So is that like, it's not just your job is to set up the food table, but why do we have the food table? Why do we need that? How does it help us make the film? Because everybody's part of making the film.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. And a big part of this work is visualizing things.
It is.
That's the cue for the visual aids.
Oh, yes. So, all right. So here comes some visual aids. So here again, so we started production in the heat of the pandemic, or actually kind of the tail end of the, around the time when people were getting vaxxed and stuff, and it was kind of safe to come out. And so we started with a lot of prep. There's always prep, and we have pretty steady, regular cadence of meetings to discuss. We have sort of a core unit of people that are, our producers, kind of art department folks. My wife is one of the producers of the film, and then our cinematographer, and so consequential people from different aspects of the filmmaking. We come together, we talk about kind of what is happening, what's next, et cetera. So you could think of it kind of like a daily stand-up, although it is not daily at this time. But it all starts with, we'll start with this basic visualization of the entire film. So this isn't something that we necessarily look at every day, but I wanted there to be some kind of visual representation of literally everything that happens in the movie itself, from beginning all the way to end. And there you go. And then it's over. And so with this, we have a kind of an overhead view, God's eye view of what we've actually finished, maybe what we're not going to do. If there's anything that we're still evaluating, because as I said, the making of the film, well, it's dragged on for a very long time, much longer than any other project I've done. We're also using that as an opportunity to really inspect and adapt, the
so you're
story,
changing your method as you, the story, but is it also
less about method, more about like the third act, sort of was one thing when we started, and then as recently just turned into a whole other thing. And what we're able to do, because we're moving in these sort of chunks, which I'll describe in a minute, is that it enables us to do that to good effect. In some cases, there are certain things that we can't do, that we kind of painted ourselves into a bit of a corner. But we also can do a lot. And this is also the nature of the story. It's a very epic thing. It takes place over many years. So there's a kind of, I don't want to say episodic because that's the worst kind of plot, but there is a kind of, there are eras in the story. So that makes interesting things possible.
Okay. So this would be the equivalent of having like a board where you're moving things across the board, except you've actually been able to create the linear narrative aspect of it as well.
I kind of think of this, as we have actual boards, so it's not dynamic like a Kanban
a board in that you've got a way of indicating when a thing is done and not done. on here. Gets a star on it if
that
it's
is
done.
true.
Okay.
That is true. Yes. So this is sort of our ultimate kind of if there is a roadmap, sort of an overall product goal type roadmap. Right. Hopefully, I'm using that word right. I still don't know what that means.
We could spend hours.
Yeah, I know. Then we have this. So we're always coming back to this periodically, but it's not necessarily our day-to-day work board.
Okay.
So this is the whole film, and we also used this in the early stages when I was working with my producer Amy Smith. We were kind of pre-editing the script. We were looking at different ways that we could different nonlinear approaches to how to present the story to create more dynamic energy or whatever we were after. So it was actually this visualization. It started as a physical board and then became digital because
So now I'm wondering if there's something like this for Memento where you could actually understand the story in order instead of.
That's out there. That is one Google search away for you. So this is the ultimate story map for the entire picture.
Okay.
Over here, what we have, and this is usually when we start our production meetings, we start with kind of this, what I would consider to be kind of a general portfolio Kanban. Okay. So this is showing us sort of, you could, depending on how you think of it, you could think of these as sort of epics. These are kind of big, major aspects of the project, and there used to be some sort of color coding for these, but I think that's probably we've probably forgotten about it. But in any case, this is sort of our high level, like, okay, how's the battleship moving across the sea, right? Kind of a thing. We also have what I have largely retired, but this is sort of like an archival board of like all the things that we did and different kinds of things. I didn't, if I was coaching myself and my team, I would probably use the done state differently than we are here, in that I would probably represent it differently just so that we could have more visual retrospection.
So these are all done things here. And can you just mention what these 4 quadrants are?
This is basically like categories of types of work.
Okay.
But this was a little more useful when we were before we really got started with production. So this was like lining up, locations and people and kind of resources and stuff. So, it's funny, the other day you had on the guy talking about agile manufacturing and I can't remember the gentleman's name.
Michael Grill.
Yeah, thank you.
Let me say it. Michael Grill. There we go.
Oh, there we go. That sounds more like
it. Working on my arm.
And one of the things that was kind of interesting that he was talking about was that there is a kind of sequence dependency with agile manufacturing that maybe isn't present in a lot of complex knowledge work like just pure software. And the reason why is you're not bound by earthly constraints. Well, in filmmaking, you are. So we still got to get everyone into a 15-passenger van and drive them to New Jersey. And, there are earthly
constraints. And
the
sun's going to go down at some point, things like that.
Exactly. Yeah. So we have a lot of hard constraints that we have to deal with and navigate, but there's lots and lots of ways to do it. So it's a complicated problem to solve. And as we all know, diverse teams solve problems better than one guy.
Small diverse teams. Yes.
Yes. So anyway, we'll go through kind of what's happening. We kind of take a view into the future. So we have a little bit of a backlog. This isn't every single thing that's left. Actually, this might be every single thing that's left. But in any case, it didn't used to be. I used to kind of load our backlog with just a small kind of what we could probably do in the next month kind of thing. But we're actually about 70-75% done. So I think that there's not much left. But in any case,
how often does this get updated?
This gets updated typically after every sprint. And I will define what a sprint means for us.
Okay.
So before I do, I'll just stop sharing for just a sec. And there we go. So basically, in a typical Scrum type situation, Scrum is designed to deal with lots of the unknown. We're trying to navigate through this jungle, and so things like the ceremonies of Scrum
Right.
help give us a sense of orientation. So among other things. But there's a certain, like, I know this is going to happen every day. I know this is going to happen every couple of weeks, et cetera.
Right.
And so these are things that, regardless of whether we're leveraging these events to the best of our ability or, whatever, there's a certain comfort that we humans feel in having some sort of predictability.
Sure.
So even if the work itself is all over the place, if it's really crazy, we might be working in, like I have people here at the Times that work in games. It's very experimental, and it's a lot of fun. And so process is not that always that useful. Skills are really useful. Process less so. However, there are also teams that are more like a fire department, and those folks they do need processes and checklists and things like that. So it sort of depends on your context.
Okay.
So the way that sprints can be really good for sort of lab work, things where you need to kind of go into a private space and try some things, and maybe come out later and show people what you did.
Right.
In our case, the way that we define a sprint is it is a predetermined amount of time, and there are certain things that need to occur within it. So within that definition, it is basically a Scrum sprint. The difference is that we're not doing like a steady week over week or every 2 weeks kind of cycle. It's more like we plan a block of things, and that we call a sprint, and then we do it.
So whether that is a weekend or 2 weeks or whatever.
Exactly. So we've had sprints.
Sorry, you're not.
Okay.
You're not overly concerned with the predictability thing of like, what is our velocity? I mean, the time box is shifting. Right. You're just trying to make sure everything's accounted for and gets done.
Yeah. And the reason why, so if we were a television show and this was sort of a long-term thing that was designed to be resilient and last forever. I mean, we want
Law and Order, New York Times.
Right. So if we were doing Law and Order, we would be looking at things like, okay, let's look at some metrics. Let's look at some things that we know we can sort of automate in some fashion. Right. And so in that respect, efficiency metrics and things like that are very handy because the nature of what we're doing, it's not totally experimental. It's a genre film. And there are certain things that we can predict because we've done them a lot. Right. There's lots of things we really can't predict. So instead of trying to do that, we give ourselves this much time. Or sometimes money just gives us this much time. So it's like, we've got this place for a week. What can we accomplish? Right. And then it becomes an issue. A lot of times when people teach Scrum, maybe even you do this, Dave, is you talk about the iron triangle and sort of the fallacy of the iron triangle when working in complex work. Yep. In the world of Scrum, you have your time and you have your cost. You pay the team X. You got a 2-week sprint. It's the scope that varies. That's the kind of the ultimate leverage point. And so part of our planning is, okay, well, what do we definitely need to do? What
prioritization is really important. Okay.
What would we love to do? Yeah. And it's less about a stack ranking type prioritization than really like an understanding of possibilities and
common understanding across everybody, right?
Exactly. So I have some examples using my Obeya. Let me just look it up here. So this is going to be, this was a pretty long shoot that we did at a kind of a abandoned apartment. It was like a floor of this big industrial loft. And so basically the first thing we do, so I'll just kind of take you through the process. The first thing we do, we have kind of a pre-production Kanban of just things we got to get done. Okay. And it's literally, it could be anything. But I mean, there are specific things that we always have to do, anything from arranging wardrobe, sound engineers, and other kind of emergent work. So this obviously happened a long time ago, so everything's over here and done. But there's just like things to do. And so we'll have like a pretty frequent meeting where we look at this and we kind of work this board. And usually we associate, colors with specific aspects of things. This was a big location. I wish if it was on my other computer, I'd show you some pictures of it. But it was a big location that required a lot of art direction. And so there's a lot of art department prep. So the first thing we do is we set this up and we start doing things. Part of the conversation that informs that is this overhead of the location itself. Mm-hmm. So that's usually a big part of the conversation is kind of determining, where we're going to shoot things, what that's going to look like, how we need to address those areas, what's going to happen, et cetera. In this particular location, we had a lot of pages to shoot. So what I did was I took all of the, actually, I think maybe Amy did this. We took all the scenes and we kind of just put them in order. And so here we have
in order in which you're going to shoot them, or in like a narrative order.
This is actually like narrative sequence because you don't shoot them in order, and it's very easy to get confused and lost, especially when things start getting crazy. So we always have a visualization that puts everything in order so that we can just know and look at a glance. Okay. And so what you see here these are little sort of scene headers that tell you that scene number and kind of where they are and briefly what happens. And then we kind of mark them off as done. So this is just a basic to-do list, but it also is helping give us orientation in story order.
Yeah. Because
the other thing that's happening, because our sprints tend to be contained by the location itself, is that we're probably in movie time, we're probably jumping out of this timeline to do other scenes, to see other scenes as a viewer. And then we're back in here and now this is happening and then we're in and out. And so again, it's very easy to get confused. So we always want to have some kind of listicle order
map to show you where you are. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. So this is the narrative map. Now we also, if you, and Dave, you're an expert in this, when you're planning a sprint,
right?
A sprint is more than just picking the tickets that you want to see done. You have to create a plan to deliver on the sprint goal.
Yes.
So the same is true for us. That, by the way, we're laughing because it's like the thing that nobody does, right? Or frequently doesn't acknowledge. They should. It really helps. So once we sort of have this order of things and we all kind of understand what we're doing, and we can use this overhead to kind of talk through exactly what's going on, both from a movie making standpoint as well as like a narrative and action standpoint. Okay. We can create like little proxies for people and have them walk around the map, and it's just it's always good to have some kind of like visual aid to walk people through this, because everyone's thinking something else. Like the person who's going to set up the lunch table is wondering if they can do it over here or if we're going to be shooting in this direction. It's like, it could be everything from the stunt coordinator and how they're going to set up some kind of big sequence to, just basic logistical stuff, lighting things, camera things, etc. Okay. So we're having that basic conversation. And then what we're going to do is come over here and actually break down what is happening each day. So and this sort of happens, I'm kind of jumping from one screen to another, but I'll just say that this happens in parallel. Okay. We've got the sprint plan for the week, and we do no more than 1 week for a sprint because it's just too much otherwise. Okay. So this was broken into 2 weeks. And so basically what we're seeing here, this is immediately analogous to what's happening over here. So I'm basically taking cards and I'm just picking the day that we're going to do a thing. So having this plan, and then in addition, we have this plan. So these are the sequence of key things that must be captured for each one of these. So this is one scene, this is one card, and this is everything that needs to occur to make that. You could think of it as sort of the narrative acceptance criteria.
Would this be like parallel to like in a storyboard, you'd have a picture for each one of these shots, or is that different?
So that level of storyboarding, it depends on the type of film, the type of thing. For certain things like big action sequences, it's like a ballet. And so you actually want to kind of really design that in a very intentional way. If it's more about like people interacting in a space, depending on sort of your style of filmmaking, you may want to just give actors a lot of room. So having too much micromanagement can be very constraining. There is a certain improvisatory element that we try to maintain always. So we always try to give ourselves as much room as we can because there's already so many constraints,
Got it.
So anyway, so we'll have for each one of these days, there is, there's a couple of things these are a couple of scenes that we need to do, 4 scenes. And for this day, this is what each of those scenes consist of. So we've got one big meaty one here, a less meaty one, etc. But just the number of cards, the number of beats in a card don't necessarily indicate the level of complexity of the thing. So
there's no sizing in none of this stuff is sized. It's just you looking at it saying, I think we can get all that done on Saturday.
Well, that's kind of where we're varying scope. Is if we have to do it like this, we could do it like this. Ideally, we would do it like that instead.
Got it.
So, the sizing aspect, there are so many variables involved in that. Yeah. It's very, very difficult to know for sure how long that things are going to take.
So you also have to be able to make a lot of at the moment decisions, like audibles you're going to have to call. And part of the structure that you've created here gives you the freedom to be able to do that. Because if you didn't have the structure and the narrative and all the other stuff, any one decision could send the whole thing off the edge of a cliff and make it not even viable.
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. So this is one of those things where having these visualizations available, and we have again, I sadly don't have the pictures available, but we have on set, we have an Obeya it's a big Kanban that's showing what we are doing, what's next, what's done, what we've slipped or what we've decided not to do. We've got these maps of the beat boards of the beats that we need to capture. And then just kind of our daily plan. So it's all there for people to see, as well as overheads and, other kinds of visualizations that we might need. So this is all.
So the whole crew has access to this.
Everybody, it's right by the lunch table. Okay. So lunch is more than just lunch. And snacks and crafty. It's also a place where we invite people to come and see what we're doing, so that they can share in the inclusion. Creating that kind of environment is actually it's not just nice and pleasant. It's also very practical, because now even the actors and the sound guy and everybody else have immediate access. Yeah. They don't even need to go and ask anybody. They can just check it out for themselves.
Okay. Now, when you're doing this on site, is it in Miro or is it like Post-its on a wall? Like, how do they get to see it?
So it's a combination of things. So we have a physical board with actual stickies that are moving across the board. Mm-hmm. We also have an iPad that has Miro up, and then the laptop that has probably other Miro stuff up. So it's a combination of all those things. Mm-hmm. We also sometimes have printouts of some of these things, but I'm not a fan of that because you can't change them. You have to you can mark things off, sure. Yeah, it's just less useful. So some things it's not bad to have a printout, but Miro is best because we can change it pretty easily. So that's the main thing, is that we always want process and tools to be as simple and malleable as they can be.
Okay. So you've got all this stuff in one place. Everybody can see it. And that's part of how they're going to learn to collaborate. And you're going to work with them to make sure that you're making this film and creating all the stuff you need to create. And without this, there would be a lot of confusion.
Well, without this, what we have is we have people that need to ask a lot of questions.
And that slows things down.
It really does. And the problem is that if you have to ask me, hey, Dan, what's next again? And I'm doing something else right now. Right. I have to context shift to your question, probably answer it incorrectly. Then, do a whole cognitive reboot to get back to what I was doing before, whatever I was thinking about. Yeah. And it just creates a tremendous amount of consternation. It's just very frustrating for everybody. And that is not conducive to that catalytic environment.
Because you want things to just flow. Okay.
Yeah. So this enables people to participate in the flow, and we can make decisions in a more modeling the system or modeling a process is a way to objectify problems, so that we can actually look at them together and not look through them at each other and say, this is your
really
fault,
important that you're side by side looking at it together. Okay. So there's a lot of...
We're all on the same side of the table. Yeah.
It's not just having a way to track the stuff. It's a way of creating opportunities for collaboration.
Absolutely. Because you never know. And a lot of times seeing things together, having the same view of reality and saying, you know what if we just did X?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't think of that. I'm glad that we're talking about this. Another important thing about this that then I hope that all of my Agile friends out there and Agile aspirants hear this is that articulation is part of the thought process.
Yeah.
If you're not talking through things, you're not fully thinking them through.
Oh,
and
that's good.
Complexity requires collaboration.
Okay.
We don't navigate complexity very well on our own because there's no one to talk to about it.
Right.
And
we
so
need to
we're not
bounce it
thinking
off
through
somebody.
things. Yeah, we got to have that. And so even if you can only collaborate with one person, that's really, even if they can only offer you a sounding board, that is better than just keeping it all in your head.
Yeah. Cool. Well, this was great. And it's a lot. I mean, we could go on for hours, but
yes, I have much more to show, but we'll stop there.
Well, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way that they can reach out to you and say, hey, Dan, you should give a talk at a conference about this?
Sure. So I'm available to do that. And you can reach me on LinkedIn,
Okay.
Dan Eberle, Eberle, and see the non-existent show notes for.
There will be show notes.
Okay, good. All right,
I'll
great.
make show notes.
Yes, I love talking about this stuff with people. I do a bit of part-time consulting. I'm obviously largely occupied, but I am always looking for opportunities to bring these kinds of tools and practices, particularly into domains where collaboration can really help, or it's very, very difficult. And it doesn't have to be technology, it doesn't have to be media. Those are the ones that I have the most experience in, but I've also used this in lots of other kinds of contexts as well.
Okay.
And so, so please reach out. I'm here for you, America.
Thanks, man. This is great. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dave.